I'd like to welcome all of you to this fall annual town meeting presentation and preview night. My name is Steve Trifletti, Plymouth Town Moderator. I'm joined to my right by Nicole Manfredi. She is the Assistant Town Moderator. To my left, we have a distinguished panel, including Stephen Neerman. He is the Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Brad Brothers is the Assistant Town Manager. Derek Brindisi is the Town Manager. Kelly McElreath is our Town Clerk. Also Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance. And on behalf of the Select Board, we have Kevin Canty, and also joining us, Jeanette White from the Advisory and Finance Committee administrative staff. Welcome to everybody who's here. Also, we have people who are watching on PACTV, and also certain town meeting members have also been issued credentials to be able to Zoom in for this meeting if they wish to be heard as part of the discussion. I'm going to begin with Assistant Town Moderator Nicole Manfredi, who has a few announcements. Welcome, Nicole. Also, to my right of her, Steve Bulletin. He is from the Planning Board, and also Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development. Thank you. Nicole.
Good evening. Tonight's meeting will replay with showtimes to be announced on Comcast 15, Verizon 47. It will also be online soon at PACTV Government Services channel on YouTube, which is youtube.com/user/PACTV video share. The October 21st town meeting will be live on Comcast 15, Verizon 47, and stream live online on the Plymouth Town Meeting's PACTV streaming channel, and will be available soon at the PACTV Government Services channel on YouTube that weekend. Tonight we welcome both in-person and remote town meeting participation with a handful of town meeting members who have joined us live via Zoom webinar feature. Saturday's town meeting format will be hybrid, with the majority of members participating in person using handheld electronic voting devices, and a small number of members participating remotely using the V-Voter system. The remote participation option was offered to voting members who are not able to participate in person. The deadline to request remote participation is tomorrow. You must notify both the town clerk and myself by noon to secure remote voting credentials. There is one correction in your voting materials. If you reference your report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on page 3, under Subcommittee A, Inspectional Services, all other expenses, the line number should be corrected from 11 to 14.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. And Jeanette White has been working carefully in preparation for this meeting with the Advisory and Finance Committee and with me. And she has put together a motions book of draft motions for those of you that are here this evening with us. And Jeanette, are these available to people online? And what is the deadline in order for people to have their motions in a printed format for town meeting?
The draft motions will be on the town website tomorrow morning after we conclude this meeting, and any changes will be on there. And the deadline for submitting motion amendments is next Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Thank you. And that would not prevent certain other motions from being accepted after next Thursday's 3 p.m. deadline. However, people are strongly encouraged to provide both your substantive motions and procedural motions prior to that time in order that we can work with you to make sure they're in the proper form and get them into the printed materials. And while I'm saying that, a number of town meeting members have worked with me and with town council and with Jeanette on motions to amend, and we have several. Some of them relate to bylaws, and I want to make it clear to everybody that while we'll do everything we can to accept motions after next Thursday or on town meeting floor, there are some motions which will not be accepted because if they involve changes to the bylaw, we may not be able to handle that on town meeting floor. It may need to be researched and prepared. So if you know in advance, and in fact, at this town meeting, we have one housekeeping article that is a result of a town meeting member at a prior town meeting handing in a motion just prior to the article, and because of the late notice of the motion, it was not possible to properly research and prepare the motion, and as a result, we have to come back to town meeting. So we don't want that to happen. We want people who are thinking about presenting a motion to contact us and let us help you make sure that it's in proper form. Next, we're going to call in our town clerk, Kelly McElraith. Kelly, Nicole mentioned a little bit about your deadline, but tell us anything else that you want town meeting members to know in preparation for town meeting.
The deadline that the assistant moderator mentioned, that tomorrow at noontime, if you need to participate remotely, is very critical. We need to get your name to OTI as well as PACTV in order to get the credentials mailed out to you in time for the meeting next Saturday. So please, by noontime tomorrow, if you are going to be participating remotely or think you will be, please send me an email as well as Nicole. And lastly, if I do not hear from you, then you will be considered to be in person at the Plymouth North High School.
Thank you. Usually at this time, I indicate whether the select board is in agreement with all of the main motions of the Advisory and Finance Committee. I was advised at our motion meeting that that may not be true, but we do have, again, Kevin Canty from the select board, and we have the town manager, the assistant town manager. So if on any of these you wish to be recognized regarding the position of the select board, I'm happy to do that. We're going to run this presentation night and preview much as we think it will go at town meeting. So first, we'll have some procedural votes. And the first procedural vote is going to be that Mr. Neerman moves that all of the sessions of this fall town meeting be commenced and conducted as a remote hybrid representative town meeting by means of the Zoom webinar and OTI virtual voting platform. So under the new law that was adopted that allows us to have a hybrid, we're going to need to vote. And it'll be a majority vote, it'll be a roll call vote. We'll use, as the assistant moderator indicated, either the handheld clickers or the voter if you're doing remotely. And the next procedural would be to move that the adjourned session of town meeting be held the following Monday at 6 o'clock. And again, that'd be at Plymouth North High School. And the third procedural vote is we have a motion to change the order of Article 5 to precede Article 2A, and that motion is being submitted by George McKay. And on any of these, people have an opportunity. And again, to remind people that we do have some articles that have a 2/3 vote on the main motion, but a motion to amend is a majority vote. So I want to mention that, except in this case, this is not a motion to amend, it's a motion to change the order. This requires a 2/3 vote. So next, Article 1 is withdrawn, and assuming that Mr. McKay's motion to change the order is approved, we would next move to Article 5. And Article 5 is to amend the bylaw, Chapter 137, Blight Nuisance. It's moved by the Advisory and Finance Committee, so Mr. Neerman moves. Town vote to amend the town's general bylaws, Chapter 137. And at this time, we're going to go to Stephen Neerman, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, to speak on behalf of the motion. Mr. Neerman.
Okay, so I move that the town votes to amend the votes taken under Article 7A, Subcommittee Report A. Do you want me to read the whole thing?
What would be what was the vote, or what was the reason why town meeting, why the Advisory and Finance Committee voted on Article 5? Article 5, amending Chapter 137 on blight and nuisance.
Okay, so you're asking for our recommendation on Article 5?
Article 5, right.
Okay, so we voted to recommend it.
Okay. And did you want to give the reason or the vote?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, let me find it.
And town meeting is going to begin promptly on Saturday, October 21st at 8 a.m. at Plymouth North High School. And we will have some opening ceremonies. with volunteers for the color guard, for the national anthem, and for the invocation. And then thereafter, we'll have some brief presentations, and followed by immediately going into the motions. And we expect at town meeting that we will move forward. And if, again, this motion to change the order is approved with a 2/3 vote, we would go to Article 5. So tonight, we're going to try to mirror that, and we're going to go with Article 5. And Mr. Neerman, are you ready?
Just about.
Okay.
Sorry.
And there'll also be a break in the morning, 2 hours, and thereafter, we will probably also adjourn for lunch for 45 minutes, and we'll be supported by Kathleen McKay as town council at town meeting. And Mr. Neerman, Article 5.
Yes, a recommendation from the Advisory and Finance Committee on Article 5, approval of 10 for, 1 against.
Okay.
The 1 against was a language not, the language was not suitable for that person. They voted against it.
Okay. And did you want to give any more information as to the reason for the approval? As to your recommendation?
Sure, we just felt that it was a good move for the town to have a language in place so that they could keep the town, gosh, I don't know the word for it, just to have language to be able to enforce the bylaw, if you will.
Thank you. So that's Stephen Neerman, and he is Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. And one of the purposes this evening, also in addition to receiving presentations, would be to let you know where you could get more information regarding this. Nicholas Mayo is the Director of Inspectional Services, and he's available in advance of town meeting between now and then if you have some substantive questions. We have multiple motions to amend, and we're going to take them up separately at town meeting. The first one is from George McKay, and he votes to amend the bylaw, Article 5, and strike municipal property from the last sentence. The second motion to amend is from John Hammond, and he moves to amend Article 5 to insert additional language regarding the overgrowth section. And then we have a third motion from Richard Cirque, and he moves to amend Article 5 to add private property. Mr. Cirque is here. Mr. Cirque, do you wish to make any presentation to those watching regarding your motion? Welcome, and please come to the podium. Richard Cirque is a town meeting member. He's been working with me and with town council in preparation, and so although this is a bylaw, we've accepted this motion because he's presented it in advance and we've worked out the language. Mr. Cirque.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The reason for my motion was because the text of the bylaw said that it did not apply to municipal property. And in my opinion, there needs to be a bylaw language with respect to graffiti that applies to public property. And so what I did was, in the first 2 sections of the bylaw, I said that those apply only to private property. And then I added a section that says that with respect to public property, the enforcement mechanism won't apply because it'll be town personnel that's removing the graffiti itself.
Thank you. Richard Cirque, town meeting member, on a motion to amend. Again, because we have 3 motions to amend, in order to avoid confusion, we'll take each one separately, we'll discuss them, vote, and then move on to the next one. And then, finally, we would determine whether we have a main motion that's been amended, and if it's been amended, the final vote would be on the main motion as amended. All motions, the motions to amend and the main motion, will be a majority vote, and of course, it'll be a roll call. The next article, Article 2A, Supplemental Budget General Fund, motion on a subcommittee report A. We have an attached, is the budget reference, the fiscal '24 budget amendments. It involves several departments. And Mr. Neerman, on your main motion, you have vote to amend the votes taken under Article 7A, Subcommittee Report A, by increasing the original appropriation by $202,686. Mr. Neerman.
So the Advisory and Finance Committee pulled out line 3, personal services, $25,000, and then subsequently voted to approve 7 to 6 for line 3 COPC support. Then we also recommended approval of $201,000, unanimous 13-4-0 against, and no abstain.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Now, if Article 5 fails, then George McKay of Precinct 8 is also going to move to amend Article 2A by increasing line 14 of the Department of Inspection Services by the sum of $125,000. That would be, again, a majority vote. And after we hear that, we would then have a vote, and it would either be as originally moved for $202,686, or if it's amended, it would be $77,686. Any further questions? If not, moving on to the motion for Subcommittee Report B. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the votes taken under Article 7A, Subcommittee Report B, by decreasing the original appropriation by $142,331. Mr. Neerman?
Okay, so as far as Article, we're on 2B?
Subcommittee Report B.
B, yep. Okay, the Advisory and Finance Committee voted approval 13-4-0 against, no abstentions.
Okay. And again, this is the majority vote, and all of these are done by roll call. Lynn Barrett, the Director of Finance, is available to people if you have questions in connection with these. And following this, we're going to continue chronologically in the warrant unless we have any other motions to change the order. We also can go back at any time to reconsider. That's a motion to reconsider. It's brought by someone who voted on the prevailing side, and that would be a majority vote. But at this time, we're going to continue with the warrant. Motion Subcommittee C. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the votes taken under 7A, Subcommittee Report C, by increasing the original appropriation by $240,735. Mr. Neerman.
So the Advisory and Finance Committee voted approval by a vote of 13-4-0 against, no abstentions, for approval of Article 2B, or excuse me, 2C.
Our Police Chief, Dana Flynn, is available if people have questions in preparation in advance for town meeting for the motion under Subcommittee Report C. We would next move to the motion under Subcommittee Report D. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the votes taken under 7A, Subcommittee Report D, by increasing the original appropriation by $670,777. Mr. Neerman.
The Advisory and Finance Committee voted 13-4-0 against, 0 abstain, to approve, to amend the votes taken under Article 7A, Subcommittee Report D, by increasing the original appropriation by $670,777, items 44 through 48, for the purposes as listed in the Articles 2A and 2B of the fiscal '24 budget amendments report attached to these motions, and further to increase by $670,777 the amount raised for the 2024 tax levy.
And for this motion, we have William Cole is now our DPW Director, and he's available to answer questions as you prepare for town meeting. Next, we have Subcommittee Report E, and Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the votes taken under 7A, Article 7A, Subcommittee Report E, by increasing the original appropriation by $66,334. Mr. Neerman.
The Advisory and Finance Committee voted to approve by a vote of 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstentions, to vote to amend the votes taken under Article 7A, Subcommittee Report E, by increasing the original appropriation by $66,334, items 49 through 66, for the purposes as listed in the Articles 2A and 2B fiscal year 24 budget amendments report attached to these motions, and further to increase by $66,334 the amount raised from the 2024 tax levy.
Thank you. And I understand that our library director, Ms. Kelsey, would be available to answer questions. Also, our Director of Planning Development, Lee Hartman, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would just mention that the money we're seeking here, $25,000 for consulting services, we have a number of items that are out there right now: affordable housing production plan, updates of the open space plan, MBTA communities. So the need to have some additional funds so that we can hire experts to help the community through some of these difficult decisions is really essential. So again, we hope town meeting supports the appropriation of this money to help us go through some of these very challenging planning issues that are before the town right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, we're going to move to the motions under Article 2B, Supplemental Budget Enterprise Fund. First, we have Subcommittee Report G, and we have the water budget. Mr. Neerman moves to amend the votes taken under 7B by increasing the amount appropriated for water budget, other expenditures by $100,000. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted to approve by a vote of 13-4, 0 against, and 0 abstain, to amend the votes taken under Article 7B by increasing the amount appropriated for water budget, other expenditures, line number 72, by $100,000 as detailed below and on the attached Articles 2A and 2B fiscal year 24 budget amendments report, and further to increase the amount raised by water receipts by $100,000 to fund the Water Enterprise Fund.
Thank you. And again, our DPW Director, William Cole, will be available. Also, the Water Superintendent, Peter Gordon. Moving on to Subcommittee Report G, Sewer Budget, which is the next item to come before us at town meeting. Mr. Neerman moves to amend the votes, again appropriated by increasing $556,000. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. The Advisory and Finance Committee vote to approve by a vote of 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstentions, to amend the votes taken under Article 7C by increasing the amount appropriated for sewer budget, other expenditures, line number 76 by $556,000 as detailed below and on the attached Articles 2A and 2B fiscal 24 budget amendments report, and further to increase the amount raised by sewer receipts by $556,000 to fund the Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Thank you. Again, we have Mr. Coyle available. Also, Douglas Pinard is the Sewer Superintendent, available to answer your questions prior to town meeting. All of these are majority vote, roll call as well. Article 3 is withdrawn. Article 4 deals with capital recommendations. And we had a request from town meeting to separate some of these items, and so that's what we're going to do at town meeting. I granted the motion to divide, and so for those of you that are here tonight, you'll see in your packet that we have a separate motion for A3, a separate motion for A4, and then the remaining motion. So I'll start with the general motion, the main motion, which is to, Mr. Neerman moves the town appropriate the sum of $2,795,374. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. Trying to find my place here.
This is the main motion, Article 4, A1 through A12.
Okay.
And this town meeting presentation night and preview is coming to you live on PACTV, and there will be the reruns, as the assistant moderator mentioned. They'll be available after tonight. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. So the Advisory and Finance Committee voted by to approve by a vote of 13 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions, to vote to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sum of money for the construction and/or repair and/or purchase and/or lease and/or replacement of departmental buildings and/or equipment and/or capital facilities for various departments of the town and/or for feasibility and other types of studies, and to authorize contracts and/or lease purchase agreements for such purposes for the terms of 3 or more years.
Thank you. And so at town meeting, we'll first go to Article 4A3, which is to replace and equip a pumping engine 5. We'll be debating that first. We'll vote it separately. Strike that. Fire Chief Neil Foley will be available to answer questions. And then we would move to Article 4A4, which is the Town Wharf Extension, and we have our Harbor Master, Chad Hunter, who will be available to answer questions. Thereafter, we would do a motion on the remaining items being A1, A2, A5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and those would all be a separate motion. And finally, we would take that vote, and that would complete the votes on Article 4. Any questions or comments from anyone? If not, if Mr. McKay's motion to change the order fails, we would next move to Article 5, which was the blight nuisance bylaw. But we already discussed that, and so we're going to move on to Article 6. Article 6 is to amend a bylaw, Chapter 166, with respect to swimming pools. And Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the town's general bylaws by striking its entirety as written in the fall 2023 annual town meeting warrant. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted unanimous 11 to 0 to recommend town meeting approve Article 6. Approval of this article will rescind the Town of Plymouth General Bylaw, Chapter 166, swimming pools in its entirety. Town Council has determined that the 9th edition of the Building Code supersedes the current bylaw as it is written and is more stringent with its requirement pertaining to swimming pools and spas, therefore supporting the Article 6 bylaw amendment.
Thank you. Again, Nicholas Mayo, the Director of Inspectional Services, will be available to answer questions. A majority vote. Any other questions? If not, Article 7 is withdrawn. Article 8 is master plan funding, and Mr. Neerman moves the town appropriate the sum of $430,000. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted unanimous 14 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions to recommend town meeting approve Article 8. Approval of this article will authorize the planning board to contract consultant services to establish a master plan that addresses issues unique to Plymouth and includes implementation strategies for town goals that are both measurable and trackable.
This is going to be a majority vote. We will have a presentation. Earlier, I introduced Steve Bulletin, who is the vice chair of the planning board. He's also the chair of the master plan task group. Mr. Bulletin, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting members. The master plan is the most important document in town. That's because it is supposed to be the document that identifies the goals of the residents based on public input and provides instruction to town officials as to how to achieve those goals. Our current master plan does not do that. As the master plan task group determined after a year of study and numerous interviews with town officials, stakeholders, private entities, quasi-government officials, nonprofit entities, 20 years ago, we did not hire experienced consultants to do our master plan and lead us through that process. Instead, we hired a single master planner. Ultimately, that individual acknowledged that they did not have the experience and resources necessary to perform the type of public outreach we require or to do the needed analyses in the areas such as housing for Plymouth. As a result, we have ended up with a master plan that is missing key sections, is internally inconsistent, and does not contain any guidance as to how to implement it. So instead of serving as a guide to the town, we have, in essence, an aspirational document that few, unfortunately, ever consult. Now, after all of this analysis of the town and its master plan, the planning board is proposing to change that by creating a new master plan. And I do note that in your town meeting books, we are describing this as an update to the master plan. That's because in 1980, we filed our master plan with the state. So thereafter, any additional master planning that we do, whether it's a completely new plan or just tweaks, is always considered an update. But be aware, we are proposing a fully new master plan for Plymouth. To address the shortfalls in our master plan, we started by creating a scope of work that emphasizes public participation and implementation. The task force and planning board consider broad public input to be essential to creating a successful master plan. It's not only required by state law, it's how we ensure that our master plan reflects our community's goals. This is not something that can be done by the town. We will need consultants with experience in communications and sufficient manpower to reach all areas of the town, geographic and demographic. Not surprisingly, this is also one of the most expensive parts of any community's master plan, and especially for a community the size of Plymouth. I'm going to ask Mr. Hartman to comment on where we are in terms of our history of public outreach.
So when we
Thank you. Lee Hartman is Director of Planning Development.
Thank you. When we look at our master plan, the 2006, as far as I can see, there was not any real great outreach in the community. So the last time I think this community really did some intensive outreach to the community to ask what their vision is for the community is 1980. That's 43 years ago. I'm getting up there in age, and I was in high school at the time that happened. So again, I think it's high time that we have that new public participation for the town of Plymouth and find out what the current residents think are most important.
Thank you. In speaking with other municipalities that have recently undertaken a master plan, a consistent statement was that the value it provides rests heavily in creating a strong implementation process. Again, that is a section required by state law and one that is missing in our current master plan. Our proposed scope addresses this failing by requiring that the master plan document provided use techniques such as scenario planning to provide a cohesive means for implementing the residents' goals as well as ways to measure ongoing progress. Again, this is a significant challenge in a community such as Plymouth. We have many competing interests, and that's why we will need consultants with a broad range of expertise, not just in subject areas like housing and economic development and open space, but also in municipal government, able to help us figure out what types of changes we need to make within our town, bylaws, zoning changes, other types of municipal activities that we will need to do in order to actually implement our master plan. As for the town's preparedness to undertake this project, I'll again defer to our planning director, Mr. Hartman.
So I wanted to point out, and in the community, I've heard that statements are being made that the town staff is not capable and not able to oversee and assist the town in the implementation of this master plan. And I'll point out that that's simply not true. For the last 2 years, we've been assisting the planning board and the master plan task group in this process and fully supporting their effort. So I can confidently say that the town has the adequate staff to help and assist the town, the planning board, and the master plan task force as we move forward in implementing this. I would also point out this is a priority goal of the planning board, the select board, the town manager, and the planning department. So not only are the resources of my department, planning and development, would be involved, but the resources of the entire town staff. So again, we're very confident we have the in-house capabilities to assist the consultant and the planning board to go through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Now addressing the budget, the one thing that everybody doesn't want to talk about. How much is this going to cost? As the moderator and Advisory and Finance have indicated, we are seeking $430,000 in funding from town meeting. Town has separately been awarded $70,000 as a line item in this year's state budget. And that'll bring the total cost, potentially, or budget at least, for the master plan to $500,000. And if approved, we would continue to look for additional grants and other funding sources to reduce the burden on town. The amount chosen is what is needed to do this properly. It's based on guidance from professionals at the Old Colony Planning Council, who have been involved in numerous master plans in the region, other towns, and consultants who do this type of work. And we know from recent events that it cannot be done properly for less. 2 years ago, Braintree decided to update its master plan. It created an initial budget of $380,000, which it was going to then spend in 2 phases, the public outreach phase and then the preparation of the document phase. However, when Braintree went out to get proposals, it received 0 responses. No consultant was willing to work on the Braintree master plan for $380,000. And for comparison, Braintree is 14.5 square miles and has a population of 40,000 people. So we know that failure to create an adequate fund for doing this will merely result in us having to delay and go back to town meeting looking for more money. That's something we do not want to have happen. It will delay planning that we desperately need. It will increase the cost of the master plan, and it could even potentially risk the $70,000 that the state has included in its budget for this year for this purpose. Now, an argument has been raised that Plymouth should do just that, put off its master plan, and instead first hire a new town employee, a master planner, to oversee the master plan process. This is something that no other municipality has done. And there's a reason for that. Towns hire consultants to lead the master plan process instead of employees because consultants have more experience, they have more resources, they provide an independent perspective, and most importantly, they cost less. If we were to hire a new town employee to oversee what the consultants are already going to be overseeing, it would double the cost of our master plan, double the cost of what we are requesting from town meeting. As for the implementation of the master plan, there are different ways that towns do it, and this is something that we will be asking our consultants to advise us on, because they have seen from other experiences what works and what doesn't. But if the town does ultimately decide it's appropriate to hire a senior planning department staff person to help with the implementation of the plan, and that would be a decision which town meeting would have to make, as this would be a permanent position with salary and benefits, we still need to first undertake the master plan process. Anyone that we hire to assist us in implementing our master plan would have to first know what it is they are implementing. And we would want to know what we are trying to implement in order to hire the most qualified individual. If we were to hire somebody to implement the master plan before we had the master plan, we would be putting the cart before the horse. In conclusion, the master plan is, in effect, a once-in-a-decade series of town-wide studies of the most crucial aspects of the community, which are then tied together in a report containing cohesive guidelines for the town to follow. When you contrast the amount being sought for this major undertaking with recent studies, single issues that the town meeting has approved, things like $160,000 for a traffic study in just one precinct, $175,000 for a public safety staffing study, you can see that the money being requested is consistent with what is truly needed in this town. But as one town meeting member has repeatedly said to me, the issue isn't the cost of doing the master plan, it's the cost of not doing it. We have seen that cost in the effects of a lack of planning on this town, and that gets worse every year that we continue to put this off. We have done all the studies and analyses of the master plan that we can. The town is ready for and supportive of this effort, and the residents are anxious for the town to become proactive rather than reactive in their planning efforts. Please do not delay this vital effort any longer. I want to thank you all for your time, for your consideration, and I hope you will support Article 8 Master Plan funding.
And I would like to just add one other quick comment. I keep hearing through this process that I am retiring, which is news to me. So to borrow from Mark Twain, I would say that the impending report, is greatly exaggerated. Okay, so there is no plan at this point, so just for the record, thank you.
Thank you, Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development, and Stephen Bulletin, who not only serves as Vice Chair of the Planning Board, but Chair of the Master Plan Task Group. This will be a majority vote at town meeting. Any further discussion? For town meeting, you have materials, the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee. There is also a supplement to the report and recommendation of the Finance Committee. There will be a motions book, which has been presented. Right now, we have a draft motions. And as we come to the next article, we also have from the Community Preservation Committee, their report and presentation at town meeting with a green cover. And at this point, we're going to begin with Article 9A, Housing Habitat for Humanity. Mr. Neerman moves the town appropriate the sum of $100,000. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted to recommend approval of Article 9A by a vote of 13 for, 0 against, 0 abstention. Approval of this article will authorize a grant to Habitat for Humanity of Greater Plymouth for the purpose of constructing a single-family home at 47 Indian Avenue with an affordable housing deed restriction.
Thank you. And we have with us this evening the Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, William Cohen, who will be speaking in connection with not only 9A, but all of the articles under 9. Welcome, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Just to reiterate the pointing out of the CPA book, the Community Preservation Committee provides a briefing book to town meeting. It's a complement to the town Finance Committee's material. We usually like to compile in this book all the material that we receive to make our decisions, so when town meeting starts to deliberate, they have added material. And this, we can start on the book. The book opens up, there's an index page, and there's different sections, starting on Section 1, which is Article 9A, Habitat for Humanity. It is a affordable housing request from the Habitat for Humanity for the Greater Plymouth area, and they're building a single-family home in Plymouth. They're applying for $100,000 from the Community Preservation Act Fund. The Community Preservation, if you look on page 2, you'll see a memo there outlining the language of the article, the vote of the committee. You'll also see on page 2 of the Community Preservation Handbook the summary intent, a little briefing on what the intent of the article is. And the intent of this article is to renovate a single-family home into home ownership for a qualifying client that the Habitat for Humanity identifies. Right now, the Habitat for Humanity has worked with the town of Plymouth through their Office of Community Development. There's a block grant that they were able to secure that allowed them to buy 47 Indian Ave. Indian Ave is the property that's being renovated. At $100,000 of CPA funds would go towards the materials. The Habitat for Humanity, I think we're all familiar with their economic model. It's more of a bond raising with different people come in and assist them. So our funds will go towards material, so the volunteers will have something to start assembling the unit. We've worked with Habitat for Humanity over the years. We find their model interesting because of how efficient their costs are, but also because they're going after a certain demographic, and that's home ownership for a single family. That concludes my presentation on Article 9A.
Thank you. And also, we have Amy Belmore. She's the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity. She'll be available also to answer questions. Moving on to Article 9B, which is housing, the Plymouth Housing Authority. We have Mr. Neerman's motion to increase an amount appropriated by the sum of $381,525. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted unanimous, 13 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions, to to approve and to amend the vote taken under Article 9D of the 2019 Fall Annual Town Meeting to see if the town will, increasing the amount appropriated thereunder for from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Trust Act, estimated revenues, community preservation services, and other available funds to the sum of $381,525 as a grant to the Plymouth Housing Authority for the purpose of acquiring an affordable housing restriction pursuant to General Law C 44B, Section 12, and General Law C 184, Section 31 to 33, for 3 units of rental housing on property located at the former Oak Street School on Oak Street in Plymouth, 02360, with any balance of funds left over after the renovation to revert back to the Community Preservation Fund, and further to authorize the Select Board to accept the affordable housing restriction or take any other action relative thereto.
Thank you. And once again, we have from the Community Preservation Committee, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. If you are following at home as a town meeting member, we're on page 36 of your briefing book. We're in Section B, which is Article 9B. Article 9B is a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee for $381,525,000 of affordable housing money. This was an application that we received from the Plymouth Housing Authority. If you turn to page 38, if you're following at home on the CPA briefing book, it's also available online at the town website. You'll see an application from the Plymouth Housing Authority outlining their proposal. I make note of that because each of these recommendations that we're providing town meeting come with the original application that was submitted by the applicant. The Housing Authority initially submitted an applicant back in 2019, they submitted an application for CPA funding to renovate the Oak Street School. The town of Plymouth had entered into an agreement with the Plymouth Housing Authority to convey the little school on Oak Street to the Plymouth Housing Authority for the purpose of converting it to 3 affordable units. They were operating from cost estimates that we presented to town meeting. We secured the funding necessary. We put it out to bid, but by that time, we were dealing with pandemic estimates were coming in much higher than we thought as the pandemic continued. In the aftermath of it, we're finding that inflation in these numbers, we had to revisit them. But in the meantime, the Plymouth Housing Authority did look for other funding sources. They were able to partner with the town of Plymouth and find some money to improve the water lines to Oak Street in anticipation for this renovation. They were able to secure funding to build an ADA compliant ramp on the back of the building. They were able to secure funding to re-landscaping the property and redesignating the parking to accommodate this future use. So the Plymouth Housing Authority has been working and progressing on this project and spending money on this project. We knew that we needed to come back to town meeting to find the funding to deal with some of the inflationary issues that I just mentioned, and that's where we came to the request of $381,525,000. Now, these units are a little bit more expensive than the typical units that we spend, but they're not anything we haven't encountered before. The units are specifically designed around seniors and veterans and people with mobility issues. The ADA compliance issues that we're following per unit does increase the cost, but again, it's a different demographic that we're going after to secure housing for, other than what Habitat Humanity is doing, where it's single-family ownership. This is a much more different, this is a different demographic that we're trying to provide affordable housing to. People speak of how affordable housing and how important it is, but people have to understand the complicated nature of how these units can become expensive based on the demographic that you're working on to provide housing. So in this case, they came in over $300,000 a unit. That's not much different than we saw in 2005 with Cherry Hill 2. They were coming in over $300,000. So this is not an unusual cost to incur per unit. But we do believe that it's important that we reuse and repurpose public buildings in the town of Plymouth in the village center for the possibility of affordable housing. This is a great demonstration of the town's ability to work with the housing authority to reuse this building in a manner that will continue to benefit the residents of Plymouth. From 1904 until 2010, it was a public school, and into the future, hopefully, it will be public housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, we have Russell Shirley. He is Chair of the Plymouth Housing Authority. He's available to answer questions. Mr. Shirley, was there anything else that you wanted to add? Welcome, Russell Shirley, again, Chair of the Plymouth Housing Authority. Mr. Shirley.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Bill. You did a very good job describing what we're trying to accomplish here. We've already got a good amount of work already completed at Oak Street, and we look forward to getting some supplemental money from town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Russell Shirley, again, Chair of the Plymouth Housing Authority. We're going to move on to Article 9C, the Historical Old Russell Library, and Mr. Neerman moves to appropriate the sum of $443,942. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted unanimous 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstention, recommending town meeting approve Article 9C. Approval of this article will authorize a grant to the Plymouth Guild, Inc. for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of the historic Russell Library located at 11 North Street.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Article 9C is a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee on Historical Preservation. It is a request for $443,942. It is an application that we received from the Plymouth Art Guild, which is an organization that was founded in 1960. That organization actually took control of the property in 2007. The Community Preservation Committee had recommended to town meeting in 2007 the acquisition of the old Plymouth Public Library to be repurposed into a community art center. And the Art Guild has been had the lease now since 2007. They've raised over $3 million and reinvested it in the building at different times on different projects, making it ADA compliant, increasing its heating and maintenance efficiency. Recently, they went after a grant, a facilities grant, that looks at 20 years what they can expect for maintenance costs associated with maintaining this building. We have a great interest in this because the building is owned by the town of Plymouth. It was purchased with CPA funds. Yes, they have a 100-year lease with an option for another 100 years, but obviously we want to see the building kept in a good condition, so if it ever came back to the town of Plymouth, we would have a building that was maintained properly. The property does have a land lease. The town still owns the land it's on, so we're very attentive to this location and this project in this building. They have been before us in the past when they were upgrading their building to be ADA compliant, and they were taking the original Russell building in 1899 and merging it with the 1820 Linden's building. They put a new entry on there, and we did fund that acquisition. But what we're seeing as we invest in this property and in this building, we're seeing that this is about economic development of our downtown. They are really the catalyst for a cultural renaissance in our downtown. Over the last 15, 20 years, they have really been leading this charge. And we have been very pleased with their research about the cost, what's it going to incur. The focus of the cost is around repointing the 1890 Russell building. It has to be repointed. There's been some alterations to the building. When they made a children's section in the lower level, there was some alterations to the building that require some attention. So this is all about the roof, and it's about repointing, and it's about getting the building ready for the next 100 years, because this work that we're going to be embarking on hasn't been done in 100 years. The agreements that they have in place with the town will continue, such as the town of Plymouth can utilize the space free of charge based on availability for town-sanctioned committees. And they'll still continue to offer free to students in Plymouth programming and events there that are sponsored by the Art Guild based on availability. So we still continue to have these agreements with the Art Center. We're very pleased to be partnering with them again, and we're very pleased with the results of this historical readaptation of into an art center and how benefit it is to our downtown.
Thank
That
you. Nate
concludes.
Myers is the president of the Art Guild. He's also available to answer any questions. All these will be a majority vote. We're going to move on to Article 9D, again, another historical preservation, this time Pilgrim Hall. And Mr. Neerman moves to appropriate $3,200,000 for a grant to Pilgrim Hall Museum. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted 9-4, 4 against, and 0 abstentions to recommend to town meeting to approve Article 9D. Approval of this article will authorize the town to borrow said funds to grant to the Pilgrim Hall Museum for the restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of Pilgrim Hall Museum located at 75 Court Street.
Thank you. And the main motion on this, the majority vote, even though there's borrowing, and before we go to community preservation, I'd like to call on Lynn Barrett. She's the Director of Finance. Lynn, why is it that we have borrowing and it's not a two-thirds vote?
It actually is a two-thirds vote.
Is it a two-thirds vote? I thought that this, on community preservation, that it was.
No, the two open space purchases are majority
I see. Okay,
and not
so
two-thirds.
this will be a two-thirds vote on this?
Yes.
Thank you. And we do have a motion to amend, and Patricia McCarthy moves to reduce the appropriation borrowed by $1,200,000. That would be a majority vote, because it's a motion to amend. We'll first hear the presentation from the Community Preservation Committee, and then we'll follow with the motion to amend from Patricia McCarthy. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Article 9C is a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee for historical restoration, rehabilitation, and preservation of the 1820 Pilgrim Hall Museum in downtown Plymouth. The request is for approximately $3.2 million. This application was received by the committee, and the committee deliberated on it. It was very important to us. It is obviously the oldest museum in North America. It obviously houses one of the rarest collections of American history, not only to Plymouth, but to the nation. This collection has grown over the years. It's not really as much as it's focused on the Pilgrim experience, but the American experience and the pre-American experience with the Native people. So this museum has evolved over 200 years into what we have in our downtown Plymouth, and the building and the roof and the skylight are causing issues with displaying artwork and artifacts properly. With a leaking roof, it has become extremely problematic. So this application is about $3.2 million, not only to address the skylight and the roofing so that the building is tight to the weather, but also looking at lighting and heating and cooling and other aspects of the building. Because as important as it is to have the building tight to the weather, we need to modernize the museum for the 21st century. This is about economic development and having a museum that is now modernized to allow the town, allow Pilgrim Hall to display its rare archives more efficiently, drawing a larger crowd to the museum and to our downtown. The museum is kind of in a state that it's been for decades, and we need to upgrade its heating, and its lighting, and its cooling, and the way we display very rare documents. So this application at $3.2 million is covering the roof, the skylight, and those things that I just mentioned. By the way, this application does provide for a 20% contingency, which is in case they start going into this building and finding some issue that they need to address, they'll have the proper funding. This application at $3.2 million is what they need to properly address the issues of the building. And it's important also to note that the Community Preservation Committee has put before town meeting at other times applications and recommendations at a similar amount of money. The Spire Theater across the street at $3.6 million, the National Memorial Meeting House at $2.5 million, this town hall at $5 million. And all the time we were putting these recommendations from town meeting, we were getting that information in town meeting as soon as we possibly could, so that we could work with our finance department that if town meeting gives us the borrowing authorization, we will begin a process of going back to future town meetings and bringing that borrowing authorization down from the 3.2. So if this article passes fall town meeting, we will be back in the spring recommending an article to bring that borrowing down, so that when the first invoices for Pilgrim Hall come in, we're going after available funds, paying as you go and not borrowing. This is a strategy that we've worked with the Director of of our finance department, Lynn Barrett. She's worked with the committee over the years, because there's a other issue that we always have to pay attention to, is we don't want to get into a situation as a committee that we can't go back to town meeting with additional applications and make recommendations. We want to keep each application viable to get in front of town meeting, and not be in a situation that we can't do that because we found ourselves in a financial circumstance. So this is not an unusual request at this amount for a circumstance like this. We do have a strategy of paying down that the borrowing as soon as we possibly can. If we do get into a short-term borrowing, we typically bring it as a priority to bring that short-term borrowing down. So we do have a strategy of handling the financial question, and we had asked town meeting to consider the full amount as needed to do the project correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And next, we'd move on to Article 9E, Open Space, land off Rocky Pond Road. Mr. Neiman moves town appropriate $175,000 to purchase the land off of Rocky Pond Road. Again, this is a majority vote, and I'll go back to Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance. Lynn, why is this a majority?
Okay, yes.
On,
okay. So,
on
open-
Article 9E and 9F?
Yes. Yes, so open space purchases with available funds through CPC are a majority vote, unlike open space purchases from other resources. Only CPC allows a majority vote for open space purchases.
Thank you. Mr. Neerman, on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 9E by a unanimous vote of 13 for, 0 against, and 0 abstain. Approval of this article will authorize the town to purchase 50.2 acres of land located at 36R Rocky Pond Road for open space, and to grant a conservation restriction on said property.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Article 9E, again, this is a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee to Fall Town Meeting for the acquisition of 50 acres, more or less, off of Rocky Pond Road. So if you were heading out of Plymouth on Summer Street and you went past the Governor Carver and you went past the Spring Hill Apartments and the skateboard park at Vine Hill Cemetery, you'd turn left and go down onto Billington Street. This takes you down over the town brook and behind the town forest in Morton Park, and it takes you out. Billington Sea Road takes you out past Black Cat Road, turns into Rocky Pond Road. And as you're approaching Little South Pond on your left, where Drew Road enters into Rocky Pond Road, on your right, there's an entrance. When you drive onto that entrance, you go back to 50 acres, more or less, that was originally a cranberry bog. And it was run as a cranberry bog by the family. The family determined through a unique program that the United States government has called the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, works with the local Cranberry Growers Association to facilitate the buying of agricultural rights away from cranberry bogs that are on water resource areas that are important for recharging our water supply. So in southeastern Massachusetts, we have a rare situation that's developed over 400 years, and that is the agricultural industry around cranberry bogging was actually going into cranberry bogs in headwaters and planting cranberries, and they ended up being used into the 20th century with chemicals and different things of that nature. So it was in the interest of the state and federal government to stop this activity. The family entered into agreement. The agricultural rights were determined through a special appraisal process, and those agricultural rights were acquired. After the agricultural rights were acquired, the Community Preservation Committee came in with the office of the Town of Plymouth's Office of Marine Environmental Affairs and entered into a discussion, filed an application with the CPC, and we began an appraisal process on the remaining value of the land. The remaining value of the land came out at about $210,000. The family offered the land to the Town of Plymouth at a bargain sale at $175,000. They have a unique program, again, to incentivize situations of this nature. State and federal tax programs do provide relief that when you sell your land to a municipality for this type of conservation, the difference between your appraisal and the acquisition cost is picked up in the form of tax credits. This allows the towns to compete when it comes to market value on real estate acquisitions of this nature. So between those two programs, we were able to get the property down to a value of $175, and this is right now the property is currently under a water restoration program that's required by the United States Department of Agriculture, but obviously if we come in control of this fee simple, our Office of Marine Environmental Affairs can build on that water restoration program and look for additional grants. We know that David Gould's office is good at that, so we're looking forward to the town controlling the property, and that completes my presentation on 9E.
Thank you. Article 9F, we have another open space matter, and this is the land off Rock Hill Road, and Mr. Neerman moves town appropriate $1,210,000 to purchase land. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 9F by a vote of 12-4, 1 against, 0 abstentions. Approval of this article will authorize the town to purchase 23 acres of land located at 280 Rocky Hill Road for open space and to grant a conservation restriction on said property.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Article 9F, again, it's a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee to acquire 26 acres more or less off of Rocky Pond Road. So if you're driving north on Rocky Hill Road past Priscilla Beach Theater, you pass the nuclear power plant. On your right, there's an entrance, and there's 26 acres more or less. This acreage is unique in a number of ways. It has different habitats on this property, from vernal pools and wetlands and a coastal forest, but it also rises quickly up out of Plymouth Bay, over 200 feet. It overlooks Plymouth Bay, the Gurnet, Plymouth Harbor. It has a very nice view. It is a piece of land that is at the peninsula of the Pine Hills, the furthest point you can go right on the Atlantic Ocean. So obviously, when we find opportunities where we can purchase waterfront property in a town that has a massive coastline, but very little public property is available to the residents to experience waterfront activities. This is more of, you're not going to be going down to the beach and playing volleyball. The coast there is quite rocky. It has a lot of glacier till and glacier deposits there. The interesting part of the property is that you can hike it and look out. And there was a building on the property. That building has been taken down. And we will build a small carport there, so a couple of cars can pull off safely and people can get out and hike around the property. Again, it has these different habitats. It was owned by and controlled by Manomet Inc., which is a science research facility. The land was donated to Plymouth Inc. Back in the 1970s. It had no restrictions. There's no protection to the land. Even though this is a conservation science research facility, they were given this land and they could dispense of it as they wished. They just need to take the proceeds and reinvest it in their research facility. They came to us. We had a discussion over a period of time, and we had it appraised. It came in at $1.2 million. We did in this article add an extra $10,000 because there was a building on the site that Manomet Inc. had removed, so the asbestos and the lead and the testing and taking away of the building has already been done. There was a chimney left on the site, so we wanted to provide the Department of Marine Environmental Affairs the necessary funding to remove that chimney and improve access to the property. But we do think this is a unique opportunity to own a piece of property on the ocean, but also at an elevation on the Pine Hills that gives you this access and experience. It's important to note that the land is across the street from the 1,500 acres, so if the 1,500 acres goes into some sort of preservation or a combination thereof, this will connect the 15 acres to the Atlantic Ocean. Right now, the 1,500 acres is landlocked. There's no access from the 1,500 acres to the ocean. So if we were to own this property across the street from the 1,500, we'd be able to build this ocean wildlife corridor, hopefully when the 1,500 acres is decided upon, the future of it. Hopefully there'll be a preservation quality to its use, and this would only enhance that.
Thank you. And moving on, under this article, 9G, Hedges Pond Demolition. Mr. Neerman moves town appropriate $157,500 for demolition. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee voted to recommend town meeting approve Article 9G by a vote of 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstained. Approval of this article will authorize the town to demolish and properly dispose of 7 buildings located at Hedges Pond Recreation Area which pose both physical and environmental risks to the public due to the presence of lead paint.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Article 9G is a recommendation by the Community Preservation Committee at $157,500 to remove a number of cabins on the site. The property was acquired 15 years ago with CPA funds. CPC went back to town meeting, secured another $1 million after its acquisition to transform it into a recreational active park site where the Department of Rec has run a successful day camp program for a number of years. So there's tennis, there's basketball, there's a beach. People come and they sign up for programming. In its time, we were looking at these buildings as a possible environmental education center, but the condition of these buildings due to their asbestos and lead doesn't really we're not able to renovate them in an efficient way and use them. We do hope to revisit Hedges Pond with the town and think about higher usage for the park. This application is not for the demolition of the Great Hall. There's a Great Hall there that would like to engage the community about possible future usage in how we can enhance Hedges Pond. We do believe it's one of the most successful CPA acquisitions in terms of its benefit to the community, from the kids who enjoy it for rec, for the families that enjoy it for its active recreational, and for the residents that are allowed to hike around it, because there's close to 200 acres of conservation land around a 30-acre pond. So it is a very special place, and we're looking forward to improving the site, and this is the first step in that direction.
Thank you. Majority vote. Moving on. 9H, reduce Stevens Field borrowing. Mr. Neiman moves the town appropriate $1,487,154. Mr. Neiman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 9H by a unanimous vote of 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstain. Approval of this article will authorize the Finance Director to use available fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Act funds to reduce the final borrowing commitment for the restoration and rehabilitation of Stevens Field.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Section H, which houses the memo outlining Article 9 and 9H in our briefing book, is a recommendation to move funds, $1,487,154 into play so that as invoices come in for the renovations of Stevens Field, the CPC has made recommendations to town meeting for the use of the CPA fund for the renovations of Stevens Field. There was a committee that was formed years ago that came up with a plan. We then went back to town meeting and started to make recommendations to move available funds or request to borrow available funds to make the renovations to Stevens Field. Now that the town has put the project out to bid, the bid has been awarded to RAW Sports. It's a construction company that has begun the work at Stevens Field. They've begun the demolition. They're actually beginning the construction. We're hoping that before July 4th of next year that Stevens Field will be finished. They also have another company working on some of the other equipment at Stevens Field. This is a good example of the town working with the community and the community working with the CPA fund to find ways of improving parks in coming up with innovative ways to utilize the money. Earlier tonight, we were talking about managing borrowing, and this is an example of that. Years ago, town meeting did authorize this borrowing. Now we're coming back and we're reducing the borrowing and moving money into play so we can put off the borrowing for Stevens Field as long as we possibly can. There have been, when it went out to bid, another example of the town was able to find some opera funds, which allowed us to go forward and sign the contracts and actually do work that we didn't think we were able to do in terms of improving some of the other amenities at Stevens Field. So it looks like it's going to be even better than we thought it was going to be. And so this is it's a happy day for the CPC and the community to finally move forward on Stevens Field.
Thank you. And finally, on Article 9, we have the CPC annual budget. Mr. Neiman moves the town vote to appropriate the sum of $565,470. Mr. Neiman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 9I by a unanimous vote of 13-4, 0 against, 0 abstain. Approval of this article will allow the Community Preservation Committee to allocate 10% of the estimated annual revenues of the Community Preservation Fund for future spending in community housing. Additionally, 4% of the estimated annual revenues of the CPA will be set aside for funding administrative and operational expenses, and an amount will be set aside for interest expense on debt. The balance of the annual CPA revenue will be held as a reserve balance, which can be used for any CPA purpose at future town meetings.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. So this is our final article, Article 9I. It is an administrative article. It sets up our admin fund so that the Community Preservation Committee can handle some of the costs that incur in processing applications. Sometimes when we receive applications, we have to do cost estimates. We have to do appraisals. We have to work with attorneys to look at whether or not this is funding. This is something that we can fund based on the law. So we do seek professional assistance, and this administrative fund does provide for that professional administrative activities associated with implementing the CPA. We also utilize the CPA fund for better signage at CPA acquisitions, better access, safer access. So we look at opportunities where that situation exists, and we utilize the admin fund for that way. We've been doing that for nearly 21 years. This recently, the CPC has decided and voted to expand some of our use of the administrative funds for clerical support. So we will be looking at this in the next fiscal year, looking at assistance with the committee on some of its clerical activities. But for 21 years, the committee has handled those activities on its own. We've had a very dedicated committee when it comes to volunteer activities associated with implementing the CPA, from drafting applications to producing material for town meetings, such as our briefing books. So probably saving the taxpayers in Plymouth hundreds of thousands of dollars, keeping that money in play for historical and housing and open space acquisitions. So we will continue to be as efficient as we can, but we realize that after 21 years, we do want to look at, as a committee, identifying clerical support and bringing them on. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Moving on to Article 10, Land Donation. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to authorize Select Board to acquire by gift a deed to property located on Bourne Road. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 10 by a unanimous vote of 11 votes for, 0 against, 0 abstain. Approval of this article will authorize the town to accept the gift of land, 2.35 acres, from A.D. Makepeace, located in the area of 220 Bourne Road, for the purpose of a new Bourne Road fire station.
Thank you. And our Fire Chief, Neil Foley, is available for information and answering questions. Moving on to Article 11, the Charging Fund. Mr. Neerman moves town vote to establish a new revolving fund to be known as EV Charging. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 11 with unanimous vote of 11 for, 0 against, and 0 abstain. Approval of this article will establish a new revolving fund, EV Charging, authorize the town to charge a fee for the use of public access EV charging stations across the community, authorize the town to use the fees collected to pay the costs associated with the electricity charges, equipment maintenance, and recurring network software costs, and authorize the town to set the fiscal '24 spending cap for $200,000.
Thank you. And Mark Reel is the Climate and Sustainability Planner, available to answer questions. It's a majority vote. Article 12 is withdrawn. Article 13 is the conveyance of tax title property to Parks and Forestry. And Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of parcels listed below in your packet from the town treasurer for tax title purposes to Parks and Forestry. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 13 by a vote of 9 for, 4 against, and 1 abstention. Approval of this article will transfer the listed parcels from the town treasurer to Parks and Forestry for open space and recreational purposes. The parcels were taken by the town through a tax lien proceeding.
Thank you. Patrick Farrar is available to answer questions. This is a two-thirds vote. Article 14, conveyance of tax title conservation, and Mr. Neiman moves the town vote to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of parcels listed from the town treasurer for tax title purposes to the Conservation Commission. Mr. Neiman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 14 by a vote of 11 for, 2 against, 1 abstention. Approval of this article will transfer the listed parcels from the town treasurer to the Conservation Commission for open space and conservation purposes. The parcels were taken by the town through a tax lien proceeding.
Thank you. Again, two-thirds vote, Patrick Farrar. Next, Article 15 is to amend a bylaw, Chapter 133, nip band. And we have Lawrence Delafield, town meeting member, Precinct 16, moves the town vote to adopt a ban on the sale of miniature single-use containers for alcoholic beverages as a general bylaw and to insert into the bylaw of the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts, Chapter 133, as written in the fall 2023 annual town meeting warrant. And this evening, Kenneth Stone will be speaking on behalf of the Open Space Committee as a designee from the Open Space Committee. Welcome, Mr. Stone.
Thank you. Article 15 would prohibit the sale of miniature single-use alcohol beverages in containers less than or equal to 100 milliliters to go into effect July 1st, 2024. The Advisory and Finance Committee raised concerns about this language being too broad, thought it might have more widespread impact than intended, and concerns were expressed that banning a 50 milliliter nip might result in bars not being able to serve a shot because the quantity of liquor in each is about the same and someone might get litigious. The town's attorney approved this language prior to the article being submitted. After the A&F raised these concerns, OCS went back to town council, asked if she believed there was any need for amendments or modifications. After a second review, she found that the language was not problematic as it is and recommended no amendments were necessary. The language is the same of a number of other communities where bans have been enacted, in particular Wareham's, Falmouth, and Chelsea, and the language has been approved by the AG's office multiple times. The primary impetus for Article 15 is litter, and litter is NIPS are a major source. In Plymouth, volunteers picked up 14,000 NIPS in 4 days of cleanups. That's despite the fact that cleanups have been occurring twice a year for over a decade and that we generally only hit certain portions of the entire town. That 14,000 is equal to about half in just 4 days of what was picked up in a month-long cleanup in New Bedford, Fairhaven, Dartmouth, and Fall River combined. NIPS are not recycled in mechanical or chemical recycling facilities effectively. There's been some questions raised about that. People could contact either Todd Knopp, our Regional Municipal Assistance Coordinator from the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, or Claire Glakowski, the Director of South Shore Recycling Cooperative. They'll confirm all this, and Plymouth is a member of the recycling cooperative. NIPS negatively impact on the beauty and appeal of our town for tourists and residents alike. They are not biodegradable. They take hundreds of years to degrade, breaking into smaller and smaller microplastics, and leach toxins into our environment as they do so. There is concern in the scientific community regarding the impact of microplastics on human health, as they have found microplastics in human blood, stools, lungs, hearts, and in women's placentas. Obviously, NIPS are a drain on DPW resources, including, in fact, plugging drains. NIP bans are effective. Falmouth performed a waste audit prior to their NIP ban. Nips made up 32% of all the litter they collected, and it's the most pervasive item in their waste stream. 1 year after the law was passed, only 6 were miniatures, and there are similar reports from other towns where it's enacted. Our current and past town managers have recognized nips as a significant litter problem in towns, and Melissa Origi, our prior town manager, was so concerned she attempted to bring a nip ban before the select board in her last year of tenure. We can't wait for the state to act. Some version of an expanded or updated bottle bill, including nip bans, have been filed every legislative session for over the 23 years now. They get buried in committee, they never get to the floor. That's happening this session as well, including a bill supported by Senator Moran, who stated the bill is going nowhere. Towns, by the way, cannot impose a nip on beverages. In addition to reducing litter, there's a secondary gain in terms of alcohol. A nip ban is a harm reduction strategy to reduce alcohol-related health and safety risks and related expenses to town safety services. A health reduction strategy recognizes that there's a problem that cannot be eradicated, but could be significantly impacted by other strategies, harm reduction strategies. Chelsea's the best example. Within 1 year after Chelsea implemented its ban, there was a decrease in protective custodies from 222 instances in 2018 to 86 in 19, while calls to ambulance and fire departments went from 742 to 127. Chelsea police noted a drop in hospitalizations from alcohol-related problems, and the current chief was quoted this year as stating that Chelsea continues to see fewer instances where authorities must place people in protective custodies. New Bedford's mayor reported that their police department, quote, has also expressed concerns about the association of nip consumption and public drunkenness. They just passed a ban in July. Officials in Wareham report similar expectations for public safety. We map the litter that we collect every year. We found nips everywhere, but there are higher concentrations in the vicinity of liquor stores. The logical inference is that customers are drinking the nips and then driving off in their cars. If you drink 2 or 3 nips, that's the alcohol equivalent of 2 or 3 gin and tonics. They are lidded to avoid being stopped with an open container, but also, perhaps even more so, to hide from family and employers the level of their consumption. And as a professional in alcoholism, in this manner and others, nips enable alcohol abuse. Nips have a negative impact on restaurants and bars while contributing to excessive drinking. People have become aware that it's now becoming rather custom practice for customers to spike their drinks to make them stronger, and in that way they buy less from our establishments, hurting them. But it's also a liability issue. If a customer has a problem and becomes intoxicated and leaves, the establishment can be accused of over-serving even if they did not. Along these lines, Plymouth Center Steering Committee, one of our 14 sponsors, voted unanimously to support and advocate for Article 15. They live with and see the impact of nips on our downtown tourist and business district every day. It's been suggested that a half pint being the smallest size that will be available will lead to more consumption. The CDC, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, many other professional and governmental publications say the opposite. They've studied it over the years, the increase of price of alcohol on consumption and alcohol-related problems. And they report from the CDD strong scientific evidence of an association between higher prices and reductions in alcohol-related harm, including motor vehicle crashes, fatalities, alcohol-related impaired driving, and its consequences among all age groups, lower frequency of injuries and deaths, and overall mortality. And there are many articles that say the same thing. The ban will not be ruinous for liquor stores. Since 2018, the Boston Licensing Board has required that applicants for new package store licenses must agree to the condition of not selling nips. Since implementation, 57 new licenses with these conditions have been granted. Boston already bans the sale of nips in the Seaport District. There are 70 stores in Boston that can no longer sell nips. If being unable to sell nips was devastating to liquor stores, so many people would not be pursuing licenses in Boston with full knowledge that they couldn't sell nips. There's been no closure of liquor stores that we know of in any town because of a nip ban, and none in Chelsea in 5 years. They've been at it the longest. According to Roy Avalenda, a former city councilor and member of their licensing board, a Chelsea liquor store license sold in '21 for the average value of a liquor store license in towns their size, and one in '22 sold for 5 times its pre-COVID value. And he states that business can't be that bad in Chelsea if that's happening. It's been sent out in an email to town meeting members that the value of a liquor license had decreased there, but according to Mr. Avalendi's report, if that happened, they certainly have rebounded lately. You will hear of increases in the number of nips sold in towns surrounding Chelsea, and that the same thing will happen here. Chelsea is 2.4 square miles, Plymouth is over 100. I'm not going to drive 40 minutes round trip for a bottle of wine or a 6-pack of beer, and I imagine I'm not alone with that. Plymouth residents will continue to frequent our local liquor stores and will continue to do brisk business. The real question isn't what % are sold elsewhere, but what's the bottom line impact on liquor stores. In 2018, Robert Mellon, the lobbyist for MassPAC, was quoted in Commonwealth Magazine as estimating that the ban in Chelsea could cost up to 10% of sales. In a September 13th, 22 edition of Market Watch, an alcohol industry publication, he stated, depending upon the store's location, nip sales average between 7% to 15% of a store's overall sales. 10 to 15% was quoted by liquor stores in New Bedford. The owner of Pioppi's Liquor at the August 15th Select Board meeting quoted the same 10 to 15%. So it appears the impact may be on the low end 7% up to 10%, and perhaps in some situations and locations as high as 15%, not the 50% that was suggested in a letter sent out to all town meeting members. So concluding no evidence of widespread layoffs in towns, no liquor stores are closing because of them, the value of liquor store licenses are holding as per the evidence in Boston and Chelsea. We respect and value all our local businesses. We fully understand why no business wants to lose any line of possible revenue. But what the data from Boston, Chelsea, Newton, Falmouth, and elsewhere shows is the continued viability of these businesses despite the absence of NIPS. So in sum, it's the opinion of advocates of Article 15, based on the experience in towns that have enacted ban, that this bylaw will eliminate the major source of litter, a major source of litter, if not the largest in Plymouth, while helping to maintain the beauty and appeal of our town. It'll reduce expenses for our DPW and town safety services. It'll reduce alcohol-related health and safety risks to our residents, and it will do so without impacting on the public's right to consume alcohol. We believe that our community, the benefits to our community are important, and we hope town meeting members will vote in favor of 15.
Thank you, Kenneth Stone. Stephen Neerman, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends that town meeting does not approve Article 15 by a vote of 6 for, 8 against, 0 abstain. The committee, this was a hotly debated topic, and there were a number of different issues brought up by the dissenters, including but not exclusive to article language in the warrant as it was presented was too broad. There's also the issue of the impact on our local businesses and the issue of individual freedom versus the greater good.
Thank you. And that is a majority vote. Article 16 is a legislative petition for harbor master employees, and Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to authorize the Select Board to petition the Massachusetts General Court for special legislation. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 16 by a unanimous vote of 13 for, 0 against, 0 abstain. Approval of this article will authorize the town to petition the Massachusetts General Court for special legislation that would place the full-time sworn members of the Harbor Master Division of the Plymouth Police Department into Retirement Group 4 as outlined in Mass General Law, Section 32(3). All full-time members of the Harbor Master have completed the police officer standards and training and are certified police officers, which provides them with the full law enforcement authority throughout the town, thereby justifying the reclassification into Retirement Group 4.
Police Chief Dana Flynn available to answer questions. Moving on to Article 17, HOLTEC pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. And this evening, we have with us Kevin Canty. He is the Vice Chair of Select Board. Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So at present, Article 17 has yet to materialize. Select Board has been meeting in executive session, I believe as far back as mid-July, to try and hash out a pilot agreement with HOLTEC. We have had, I believe, 5 executive sessions so far. We have another one scheduled for tomorrow evening, should we need it, as well as one on Tuesday, should we need it. We are optimistic that we will have a pilot agreement that will be beneficial to the community and do some interesting things to secure our future in relation to the currently decommissioning nuclear power plant. But we do not have anything yet, and we'll keep town meeting and certainly the Advisory and Finance Committee informed as things continue to develop. But for now, I can assure you that your Select Board is working diligently along with town management and council to get something hashed out for town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Canty. And Mr. Canty, is there a meeting scheduled for the Select Board on the morning of town meeting?
Well, we have one scheduled. We may be before Advisory and Finance then, so whether or not that meeting shall occur or not is also open to change and subject to change. So we shall see.
And Mr. Neerman, does the Advisory and Finance Committee have a meeting posted for the morning of town meeting?
We will be there before town meeting, waiting for HOLTEC.
Thank you. Article 18 is a solar pilot for 17 Plymouth Street. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote pursuant to provisions of general laws, Chapter 5938H, authorize Select Board and the Board of Assessors negotiate and enter an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 18 by a unanimous vote of 14 for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. Approval of this article will authorize this payment in lieu of taxes, also known as a pilot agreement, for personal property tax associated with a floating solar development, which will occupy approximately 5 acres within a 12-acre agricultural reservoir located at 17 Plymouth Street in Plymouth, shown as lots 3, 4, 5, and 6U on Assessor's Map 107. This is a floating solar project with a total production size of 2.476 megawatts. The terms of this agreement would be $15,000 per megawatt with the escalation of 2.5% per year for 20 years. 50% of these payments will be deposited into the Environmental Affairs Fund.
Thank you. Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance, available to answer questions for this. Also for the next one, Lynn Barrett, anything you'd like to add regarding the pilot agreements?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Article 19, solar pilot for Long Pond Park and Ride. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote again to authorize a pilot. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 19 by a vote of 13 for, 0 against, and 1 abstention. Approval of this article will authorize this payment of tax in lieu of taxes pilot agreement for personal property tax associated with a solar development located at Exit 13 Long Pond Road Park and Ride in Plymouth, shown on Assessor's Map 89. This is a parking lot canopy solar project with a total production size of 0.67745 megawatts. The terms of this agreement will be $13,000 per megawatt with an escalation of 2.5% per year for 20 years. 50% of these payments will be deposited into the Environmental Affairs Fund.
Thank you again. Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance, available to answer questions. Article 20 is withdrawn. Article 21 is to amend a funding source. Mr. Neerman moves to amend the vote under Article 9A38 of the April 2023 Annual Town Meeting. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 21 by a unanimous vote of 13-for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. Approval of this article will amend the vote taken under Article 9A38 at the April 2023 Annual Town Meeting. Design cemetery space to amend the funding by reducing the amount from Article 9A-15 of the April 2009 Annual Town Meeting cemetery software by $9,855 and by increasing the amount from sales of lots by $9,855. The purpose of the amendment to switch the funding source due to the cemetery software fund balance being less than the amount needed to funding source, sales of lots that has the appropriate fund balance to satisfy Article 9A38 funding amounts approved by town meeting.
Thank you. Again, Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance, available to answer questions. Article 22 is to also amend the April 2023 Article 13 Promotion Fund. Mr. Neerman moves to amend the vote taken under Article 13 of the April 2023 Annual Town Meeting. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 22 by a unanimous vote of 13-for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. Approval of this article will amend the vote taken under Article 13 at the April 2023 Annual Town Meeting Promotion Fund to fix a typographical error and increase the appropriation by transferring $136,478 from the Town Promotion Fund created pursuant to Chapter 14 of the Acts of 1993 for programs and projects that enhances the beautification, recreational resources, public safety, promotional and marketing activities, events, services, and public improvements.
It's a majority vote. And now we're going to move on to Article 23, a special purpose article, opioid settlement. And Mr. Neerman moves the town authorize this article to appropriate $239,092.09 from free cash to administer the opioid settlement abatement funds. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 23 by a unanimous vote of 13-for, 0 against, and 0 abstentions. Approval of this article will authorize the transfer of $239,092.09 from free cash to the opioid special revenue account for the purpose of funding community-based organizations focused on preventing drug addiction and providing mental health services across our community.
Derek Brindisi is our town manager. Mr. Brindisi, anything you care to add on this article?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
And he's available to answer questions of town meeting members prior to town meeting. Article 24 is a citizen's petition to amend the zoning bylaw 207-11 solar system. Mr. Neerman moves the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw governing ground-mounted solar photovoltaic systems. Mr. Neerman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 24 by a vote of 5-for, 4 against, and 2 abstentions. Approval of this article will amend the zoning bylaw 207-11, ground-mounted solar photovoltaic systems requirement for 4D financial surety requirement to include projects that exceed 8 feet above grade in height, amend the requirement for 5A notification for a butter notification of potential GMSPS projects to include projects that are within 700 feet of the property line of the parcels or parcels upon which the GMSPS proposes to be situated, and add a new section, G, view shed affected to the zoning bylaw. The committee had mixed feelings about the intent of this amendment.
Thank you. And at town meeting, following the motion from the Advisory and Finance Committee and its recommendation, we will then have a petitioner presentation. This is a 2/3 vote on the main motion We'll come to the motion to amend after we hear the petition presentation, and we have this evening resident Mark Pacheco. Welcome, Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you. So I am representing a group of people. I'm also petitioner on Article 24. First off, this is not an anti-solar petition. You may have heard otherwise. It most certainly is not. I personally have done a lot of political work on green projects, notably wind farms throughout the Midwest. If this was not a green project, I wouldn't be here tonight. So what is it? We are attempting to ensure fairness in the bylaw. The current zoning bylaw instructs the town to minimize impacts on character of community property values, etc. We're just adding more tools. We're putting the onus on the developer to ensure that proper screening is done. Right now, it's amorphous as to who's truly responsible. We're saying that the developer has to come to the table with a plan that adequately screens and minimizes impacts. Does that mean we are saying they have to 100% screen it? No, that's not fair. It's probably not even possible. What we're saying is you have to adequately and sufficiently minimize the impacts upon the very same thing that the current bylaw talks about, which again, property values, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we have a developer who's not willing to do this, not willing to go a little farther to ensure fairness, we're probably not working with the right developer. There will be a motion from the floor shortly, just so everybody knows. That's a motion for severability. That's something that council wanted to put in place in. Lastly, just quickly, there are two other small things that our bylaw does do. It increases the distance at which people are notified. Why is this? We're going from 300 to 700 feet. These are massive projects. 1 megawatt is 5 acres of solar. That's huge. We're going from 300 to 700 feet. You're still going to see it. It just allows more people to know what's going on. The other amendment is we're just increasing the number of projects that would have to put forth a bond if the project fails, to make sure that the town isn't stuck paying the bill. Take it down. That's the soup to nuts as fast as I can. Without Attorney Angley here with me tonight, he's actually with Precinct 1, so you'll get the whole road show on Saturday. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark Pacheco. And then we have a motion to amend. So the main motion is 2/3, but the motion to amend is a majority vote. And Matthew Tavares, Precinct 2, moves to amend the language by inserting the following section: severability. If any section, provision, or portion of this bylaw is deemed to be unconstitutional or invalid by a court, the remainder of the ordinance shall be effective. Mr. Tavares, do you care to be heard on your motion to amend? Again, town meeting is going to be a week from Saturday, October 21st. Mr. Tavares, welcome.
Sure. Mr. Pacheco alluded to it in his remarks to you guys earlier, that, this was something that town council was looking for. I know it was during the presentation before the select board, was also something the select board was concerned with. I think it just also speaks to the fact that the citizens that are petitioning this article are also looking to work with as many people within the town to get to push this article through, and I think that they've done a great job with that, and being able to assist with this motion to amend on severability, I think is proper at this time.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this or any other article? If not, I'd like to thank our panel: Jeanette White from the Advisory and Finance Committee, Kevin Canty, Vice Chair of the Select Board, Lynn Barrett is our Director of Finance, Kelly McElraith is our Town Clerk. We also are joined by our Town Manager, Derek Brindisi, and Assistant Town Manager, Brad Brothers. Thanks again to Stephen Neerman, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, Nicole Manfredi, Assistant Town Moderator. This concludes the Fall 2023 Annual Town Meeting Presentation Night and Preview. Thank you for joining us. I am Steve Trifletti, Plymouth Town Moderator, and we look forward to being with you again on Saturday, October 21 at 8 a.m. at Plymouth North High School. Good evening.